Hi, I'm Tamara, and this is TELUS Talks with Tamara Taggart. Hi, everyone. Today we are talking about supporting entrepreneurs and the benefit of social impact investing. And who better to bring back than our past guest, Lane Merrifield. Lane, I'm so happy to see you. I have to say a couple more things about you in case people weren't listening last time. I need to say that you're one of Canada's leading tech entrepreneurs. This is true. This is a fact. You found Club Penguin, which is what we talked about last time. It's the largest children's online social network, and you're the latest dragon on CBC's Dragon's Den. And you have also served as both the treasurer and a director of the board of the TELUS Friendly Future Foundation. And I gotta say, Lane, I had so much positive feedback from our last conversation.
Oh, wow. Thank you. That's great to
No,
hear.
it was, I mean, I'm not going to say I almost said it was so surprising, but no, that's not,
That's okay. That's how
no,
I
no,
feel. I'm
no,
surprised.
no. But what I mean is like unexpected people said to me, wow, I really enjoyed your conversation with Lane and I learned a lot.
Oh,
And I
cool.
felt the same way. And I'm really excited to have you back.
That's
So
great. That's
it's
great. Well,
good
it's
to
great to
see
be
you.
here. Yeah, and I'm obviously a big fan of your podcast and happy to be a part of it.
Well, I'm happy to have you back. And we want to talk about supporting entrepreneurs. And, there's, I guess, we've been in isolation. We've been, working from home. We've been doing all kinds of things these past 8 months. Why is it, and we're seeing entrepreneurs emerge. Why is it
Mhm.
important to support young entrepreneurs?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to support all entrepreneurs, and we're seeing
Mm-hmm.
that more and more as well. We're seeing, young, old, everything in between, and I love that. Listen, entrepreneurship it typically is spurned from some element of crisis, some element of conflict, something that is broken in the system, and that's usually what most entrepreneurs kind of cling to and say, "Okay, I want to go and fix that." Well, we're surrounded by broken right now in our system. We're surrounded by change and evolution um, and entrepreneurship is needed now more than ever. And the good news is that as a result of many who are working from home and having to shift around their schedules, is there's time now combined with that. And so we recently finished filming this most recent season of Dragon's Den, and I got to say, the pitches, the business ideas, the entrepreneurs were so much more refined than they ever have been. And I think part of that is for two reasons. Number one, they're more passionate than ever because of how important change and new ideas and entrepreneurship is. But they've had the time to really think through their ideas, refine them, perfect them, and then try to raise some money around them.
Mm-hmm. What was it like when you were first starting out?
Hmm. Well, I mean, frankly, for me, that same kind of frustration of something being broken was what drove me to be a part of starting Club Penguin. It was actually my co-founder and I both had kids who were at the time about 2 years old. We're just starting to use a mouse and use the computer, and I realized that there's nothing really out there for kids that was social. There was a lot of single player games, there was learning games, there was a lot of isolated experiences, but there wasn't anything that really brought kids together. And yet kids were streaming into sites like Facebook and at the time MySpace and World of Warcraft and these games and things that weren't built for them and they weren't safe for them. And so our whole vision was just simply saying, can we build something for our own kids that hopefully enough other parents find helpful and find useful that they'll want to participate and want to subscribe to it, and something that we can be proud of as parents first and foremost, and trying to solve that. So that's what kind of got us going.
But was it hard? Was it scary? Was it easy for you? Did you were you independently wealthy and you could just start whatever you wanted?
Yeah, no, no. It was all of the former and none of the latter. We were terrified. I can still tell you to this day what the weather was like outside when I sat in my car in the parking lot of my bank, getting ready to go in and sign a letter of credit or get a line of credit on my home in order to pour all of that into starting this crazy idea around penguins that all of my friends I think the nicest thing my friend said was, "Wow, you seem really excited about this." the rest of them, the rest of them were basically saying, "Don't do it. Don't put your house on the line for this." And but I had to. I was so passionate about it. I believed in it so much. I knew we had something special if we could pull it off. And the rest is history.
So I'm curious, I think back to when I was in school and career days and all that sort of stuff. Do we teach do we teach young people how to be an entrepreneur, how to think like an entrepreneur, how to or are we still stuck? I mean, I don't even know if you know the answer to this. Are we still stuck in the old ways of thinking, like you'll graduate, you'll go here, you'll do this, and then you'll get a job and you'll do this?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think we're getting better all the time. I think, frankly, teachers are more entrepreneurial than they've ever been, especially in times like these. And I think as a result, students are learning from it. We're also at a time in history when entrepreneurialism is celebrated. I mean, there was a time when people would quit their job to go try and start a business, and they would just be considered unemployed for the next few years. It was not always celebrated like it is today. So that's all helpful. That being said, the system of education still, sadly, en masse, revolves around the industrialized, education methods that were largely about, preparing people for the workforce, preparing people for the factories, preparing people to learn how to follow instructions and do as they're told, and memorize as much as possible. And the reality is that's not the workforce of the future, and we know that, and we're seeing that all the time. And so I still think there's a way to go. I still think there's a lot to be improved. The good news, like I said, is that entrepreneurship is being celebrated, and so kids are wanting to be entrepreneurs. They're trying to be entrepreneurs. They're starting their ideas sooner than ever before, and frankly, because of technology, they can start more affordably than ever before. If we were to start Club Penguin today, with the technology that's available to us today than was almost 15 years ago, it would have cost us half as much to get things off the ground because there's so many more resources to pull from. So I think the opportunity is there. Do we still need to teach it? Absolutely. And not only that, but I think financial literacy in general, business in general, is a huge gap in our education right now. And we're really not doing our students any favors.
We can start so much younger too. I'm thinking about, when I see somebody that has done something, like, I mean, the best example I can think of is the woman who started Spanx, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
So, obviously, a story that's used a lot, and she came up with this. I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say is, it's like I look at people like her, and I'm like, why didn't I think of that?
Yeah.
I could have done that, but the difference is I didn't do it.
Yeah.
So
100%.
what what is it about, so like how do you is fear what holds most people back?
Yeah, without a doubt. In fact, I've got a whole philosophy on this, on how actually fear is probably one of the biggest detriments in all of our lives. In whether we want to be an entrepreneur, whether we're just in the workforce, it doesn't matter. And it's not the obvious fears. It's the subconscious fears. It's the fears we don't talk about. It's the fears we don't want to admit at dinner parties that tend to hold us back. And they'll hold us back in very justifiable ways. Well, that's crazy. I can't afford that. I shouldn't do that. There's no way. What if I don't recover? It's not good for my family, not good for my kids, not good for. I mean, I had to sit there and come to the reality that if this crazy penguin idea didn't work, chances were high that we would go back to an apartment. We had this house. It was a beautiful kind of house of our dreams that we had finally moved into, and we put it all on the line, saying, "Well, we've got young kids. We can rebuild again. We can do what we have to do." Was it terrifying? Absolutely. And I think sometimes people think that the difference is, well, they must not have fear. They must not feel fear the same way. I think actually the biggest difference between successful entrepreneurs and those that aren't are actually the successful entrepreneurs learn how to step through the fear. They learn how to progress through fear and how to turn it from a liability into an asset. It turns from a detriment into a propellant. And eventually that adrenaline kicks in, and it's like, ready or not, here we come. We got, we're past the point of no return now. We got to go be successful. And you mentioned something about executing that is 100% right. I tell people all the time, I am not investing in ideas in Dragon's Den. I'm investing in executors. I'm investing in people who I believe can go out and build the idea, not just the ones who come up with the idea. Because frankly, I've seen it 1,000 times. I get emails every single week from people who say, "I've got this incredible idea, and all I need is you to step in and help me take it to the next level." And by take it to the next level, what they're really saying is, I want you to come and build the business for me because I don't have the courage or the ability or whatever to go and do that. But I've got this idea and that's worth everything. Frankly, if I'm going to step in and build a business, I'm going to be taking 90% of the company because the idea is only about 10% of the value there.
Mm. Do most startups fail? Or is it like, a mo I feel like, with Penguin or with Spanx or with all these other things, it's like, wow, that must have been wow, they tried something for the first time and look what happened. It was
Yeah.
such a
Well,
success.
and listen, I think the media loves to celebrate successes, understandably. And I think in some ways it doesn't do a great service to people. I mean, the media also loves to celebrate the lottery winners. They don't necessarily run bios on all
True.
the lottery losers. And the same is true with entrepreneurship. You spend enough time reading about the winners and ignoring the losers that it can skew your perspective of what that really looks like. So, of course, yeah, I mean, failure is all over the place, and fear of failure is one of the biggest fears that entrepreneurs have to face. And of course, not all ideas are winners. They're not all going to work. My advice to entrepreneurs is always, listen. There's nothing wrong with failing. Just fail fast, get it over with, and move on to the next one. And try not to burn as much capital as you have to, and any more capital than you have to get there. There's nothing more sad to me than when I'm sitting in Dragon's Den and someone comes in and I hear about how they've taken their life savings or they've taken their family inheritance and they've invested it all into this idea and they're just about to launch it. And it's like, you've invested, sometimes over $1 million into this idea and you still have no clue as to whether or not it's going to work. Like that's crazy. And I would tell them, why wouldn't you just do a quick sample, try this, just launch part of it and just see if it resonates with people. Because if it doesn't resonate, all of that money is gone. Whereas if it doesn't resonate and they would have only spent a quarter of it, they'd have 3 more kicks at the can before they've spent that money.
So do startups have, do they help an economy? Do they help an economy thrive?
They're critical. They're critical. And in fact, as Canadians, we need our startups more than ever because we know, everyone admits, we have to diversify our economy more. We cannot simply rely on resources, natural resources, and tourism and other things. In the case of us out here in BC, to be able to solve it for us. We cannot just rely on trade with the US to solve it for us. We need to build healthy, thriving companies. And the beauty of technology and tech companies is that they're infinitely scalable and they're also almost instantly global. And so, you don't have to build it to a certain size before you can go and expand into other areas and other countries. And that's part of the power of it. It's one of the things that I love the most about it. It's also part of why the largest companies in the world right now are all tech companies, and they will be for the foreseeable future. It's one of the reasons why I think on the last podcast I talked so much about how every company needs to be thinking about how they can be a tech company. Every company needs to be adapting and adopting technology. And so, yeah, I mean, it's one of the reasons why I'm on Dragon's Den. They don't pay us a lot of money. In fact, I'm spending my own money when I'm investing in these companies. But I love encouraging entrepreneurship, and I know it's a show that whole families will sit around and watch together. I've seen kids who've come on the show at 14, 15, 16 years old who say, I've been watching it ever since I was 5 years old, and they know their numbers and they know what the definitions are, and they frankly sometimes have put together a healthier business than some of their older counterparts. And I love that. I mean, that's what wakes me up every day.
Yeah. So how can we support, when I say we, like, me, people listening, how can we support entrepreneurs who are trying to, bring their ideas to the world?
Well, there's a lot of different ways, and I tell people all the time that anyone who has a desire to be plugged into entrepreneurship can be, because there's so much need out there. I live in the Okanagan here, and there's a lot of folks that have made money and been successful in other parts of Canada and have chosen to live here. And many of them will continue on with their careers here. Some may just retire here. But I'm always encouraging people, even if if you're retired. In fact, I literally had a retired CFO of a major bank who I ran into here in the Okanagan, and I said, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm just golfing and enjoying the water." And I said, "Would you be willing to mentor a handful of startups who I know their financial plan is a disaster, their business plan's a mess? Like, would you give him a couple hours a week?" And he lit up and he was like, "Absolutely, that'd be so much fun." So some people think like, oh, if I'm not investing in companies or if I don't have if I'm not wanting to jump in and work at a startup, well, then it's not for me. But the reality is, there's so many needs out there for startups and entrepreneurs. It's incredibly lonely. I mean, even just encouraging them, even just taking them out for a coffee, being one of their first customers, giving them great feedback, being willing to try their product and say, listen, I'll sit down with you for an hour and tell you the things I love, and I'll tell you all the things I hate about it. All of that is invaluable to the process. And so whether it's mentorship, whether it's investment, whether it's counsel, or encouragement, everyone has a chance to participate in entrepreneurship, and our economy will grow as a result of it.
I love that. You mentioned you're in Kelowna, and as you know, I mean, you're a board member, so you know that it's important to tell us to give back and support our community. So on behalf of the TELUS Talks podcast, we will be giving $500 to the Kelowna Women's Shelter.
Oh,
And
thank you.
yeah, and I mean,
That's
why
amazing.
is that organization important to you?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm connected to a lot of different organizations, and have been. It's a passion of mine, and I think giving back is so critical to everyone's health, and my own health and mental health included. The One of the reasons why I'm so passionate about the Kelowna Women's Shelter is that I've seen and heard stories firsthand of how COVID has trapped families together that are sometimes very dysfunctional. Sometimes there's abuse going on. And the Kelowna Women's Shelters has been invaluable. I've worked with them for over a decade now. Has been invaluable in creating a safe space for women and their kids to be able to, leave an abusive home. And now that we're living in a situation where people are sequestered to their homes more than ever, kids aren't able to escape to go to school for the day, or a spouse isn't able to escape to go to the office for the day. The need has just skyrocketed, and so that's
Yeah.
one of the reasons why I'm passionate about it. The one of the former directors worked for me at Club Penguin back in the day, and she left to go be a part of that organization, and I have followed her along, and I've seen the amazing work they did. We did painting parties with our company there, where we went and repainted the whole place, and it's really a great organization.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, they do good work. I'm familiar with the work they do, so that's great. And they will be getting $500 on
That's
behalf of
awesome. Thank you so
TELUS.
much. I
Yeah,
love that.
yeah.
I love that.
So let's talk a little bit about social impact and investing in it. What is the impact of investing, and why do we need to do that? Well, like, how can social impact investing, help our generation and the generations to come?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the reality is that startups, any entrepreneur, ultimately is following the dollars, and that's what they should. Where's the opportunity? Where are the dollars? How can I grow my business? In the early years of most companies, they need those investment dollars, and so they'll do the same thing. And so, historically, the DNA is oftentimes shaped by who you bring on board, who invests in your companies, and what their goals are. And so if you bring on investors who are just, profit hounds and driven to just, make as much money and much return as possible in the shortest time possible, kind of all else be damned, you're going to end up with companies and entrepreneurs that chase down those goals on behalf of their shareholders and investors in this case. But if you have investors like social impact investors who have a goal to see not only, a successful, thriving, healthy company, but also see that company wanting to make a difference in the world, wanting to do good for others, that's going to be a part of the DNA, the company DNA as well. And frankly, with Club Penguin, Dave Crisco, who was our third co-founder, who was the kind of angel investor who helped us get started, he had a tremendous big heart, and gave back at every opportunity. And that DNA carried into, I still remember him saying, I remember going to him and saying, Dave, you can't keep giving away all this money, because, we might not make payroll next month if this doesn't come through and this doesn't happen. And like, we need a
Right.
bigger nest egg here. And he would just kind of laugh and smile and say, listen, it'll work. It'll work itself out. It'll take care of itself. This is important. I need to give this away. And in fact, he would use an analogy sometimes of a sink. And he would say, listen, like a sink, yes, you want the water flowing into it, but you also need water coming, kind of pouring out of it. Because if you just try to trap it all and collect all the water, you're just going to end up with a cesspool. And he said a healthy business is doing the same thing. It's giving as much as it's taking in. And that's critical. And I've seen that happen. We did it with Penguin. We gave away over 10% of our revenue, which over the years ended up, being $30, $40 million.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we wouldn't have been as successful if we didn't. But that was part of our DNA, and we were lucky to have that DNA. For other companies, for other startups, having an early investor that brings that type of DNA into a company is so critical, and will set that company up for success in doing good and giving back from the outset.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in that. And but a lot of people aren't. Like, I think that there's this I agree with you 100%. And I feel like sometimes there's an expectation that, oh, well, you're a multi, million dollar company and you should be giving back. But that doesn't mean they do, right? It's like it's not a given that they will.
Yeah.
And so when they do and they are making a difference, and then you can also get criticized for it for, oh, well, you're just doing it because it's, good advertising for you. It's like, well, I mean, can you speak a little bit to that? Because I think that there's this, it's funny. It's like, it's one or the other, right? Where it's like, if you just do it and I love what you said about how it's the sink, right? Like that
Mhm.
makes sense. It's got to keep flowing.
Yeah.
That's how it
Yeah.
stays healthy.
That's exactly it. And I think, I mean, statistically, a company that doesn't give anything away when it's small is less likely to give anything away when it's big. And I think oftentimes that's used as a cop out. Companies or entrepreneurs or small businesses will say, listen, I can't afford to give anything away or help out in any way right now. So I'm going to wait. And once I've reached my $10 million goal in revenue, or my 50 million, whatever, once I've reached that size, then just look out. I'm going to give away so much. But the reality is, statistically, they don't, because it's not part of their DNA as a company. And giving away doesn't need to mean just pure cash. I mean, you can give away time, you can give away resources. There are times when we were that early marketing company before Club Penguin that Dave Crisco would just give away free designs to a nonprofit, to a charity that needed a logo. And of course, there was dollars attached to that in terms of salaries. But oftentimes those same employees would also do it after work for free, and because they wanted to be a part of it, and they wanted to be a part of something bigger than themselves. I mean, there's so many benefits from a company perspective. It's easy to simply look at and see, okay, well, the benefit only goes to the charity, the organization, however you're connected to it. But the reality is, number one, and you already mentioned this, I think it brings a company relevance. Frankly, I don't I don't know why any company doesn't have some sort of a social entrepreneurship or social enterprise bent to them. If they don't, I think they're foolish, because the expectations. I mean, 90% of millennials will switch a brand to one that they believe is making a bigger impact. And so the loyalty, this idea that, well, we've had the same customers for 100 years, they'll always be there. Not anymore. I mean, the expectations are rising. So I think it speaks to relevance. I think it's a huge element for your people and your staff. Same thing, younger employees aren't sticking around companies for 20, 30 years anymore. They want to be a part of something bigger than themselves. They want to be a part of something that is giving back, that's making a difference. They want to look back on their legacy and not simply say, wow, look how much money I made. They want to say, look at what the impact is. I still have former employees of Club Penguin say, I can't believe that there's 100,000 kids in schools today that were built by Club Penguin all around the world. That's their biggest accomplishment, not the money that they made while they were there, or the success they had, or the people they met, or even just the fact they got to work for Disney. It's very cool, but all that stuff fades away.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a big one. And frankly, just karma. It's the right thing to do. And I wouldn't be able to sleep at night if I wasn't involved with things like the TELUS Friendly Future Foundation, and all the good work they're doing, and some of these other organizations. I just life is too short to just focus on trying to make money and trying to hit some sort of made up idea
Yeah.
of success.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And when you were talking, you made me think of something. I've been taking a pottery class, okay? And it's put on
That's
by a
awesome.
young woman in her studio. It's just a tiny little studio that she pays way too much money for. I mean, Vancouver rent is ridiculous.
Yeah, it is.
And she's pretty amazing. And when she charges, she can't have as many people in there now because of COVID and restrictions, right? So she charges you to come, and part of your fee goes to a fund to have it so that kids in the downtown east side can also take pottery.
That's
That's
awesome.
that's a perfect example, right, of what you're saying. This doesn't
That's
have to
exactly it.
be, yeah. I
It's
mean,
not
and
always
if
about cutting a check. It can, if people apply the same level of creativity and ingenuity into finding ways to give back as they do into finding ways to make money, this world would be much, much better for it.
totally, yes. Let's turn that into a t-shirt. There's my idea. I mean, it's yes, right? Like where we would be so much better off for this. Okay, so we talked about some. I think you mentioned some social impact stories. I mean, the biggest one, obviously, this is the TELUS Talks podcast. You're on the TELUS board, and TELUS does, I think, a pretty spectacular job of, some successful social impact stories, and
Absolutely.
are definitely changing lives. And that is not every big company does that.
No.
And they do it because, from what I know, I mean, I'm not an employee, but I do this podcast for TELUS. But they do it because it feels good. You're right; it feels good to give back. And
Yeah.
I know this firsthand too. So how do we convince other companies to do this, or how do we convince startups to do this? Like, how
Yeah.
do we teach them that, or do we have to?
Well, I think first of all, there's a whole generation of people coming up that have that social conscience and social entrepreneurship kind of ingrained in them already. One of my favorite shoe companies, Tom Shoes, and yes, they're great fashionable shoes, but I also like the one for one. And sometimes they can be picked on for it as, oh, that's a gimmick and it's a this. Listen, I know I can't say I know him, but I've met Blake who founded it. And he's incredibly authentic in his goal to give away a pair of shoes for every pair of shoes that's purchased. And you can criticize it all you want of, well, he should be doing more, could be doing this. Listen, the bottom line is he's doing it, and he's doing it in a way that a lot of other companies aren't. And can things always be perfected? Absolutely. But you know what? We don't live in a perfect world, and I would hope that more and more companies would take inspiration from that. But I think we've got a generation that is coming up with companies like that, having seen it, witnessed it. I look at companies like Patagonia, who have purchased massive amounts of rainforest and endangered kind of areas around the world. There's so many great companies out there. Obviously, TELUS being an incredible Canadian one. I mean, I'm fortunate in getting plenty of invitations to be a part of boards and be a part of amazing organizations, and I dig into them and really try to pick a few, because I can't do them all, but pick a few that I really believe in. And the thing that I loved about the TELUS Foundation is not only is the company doing a lot, but Darren, the CEO, is leading by example, and the employees are involved in it throughout as well. So it's not simply, sometimes there can be almost this disconnection between the company's employees who are working hard to make money, and then the company just cuts checks, a couple times a year over here, and it's not always interconnected. And I think TELUS is a company that's done a great job. And again, not to just toot TELUS's horn, because there's a lot of great companies out there.
There are,
But
yeah.
truly, TELUS has done a great job of really integrating it with their culture,
Yeah.
integrating it and leading by example that way. And so I think it's going to happen naturally over time. I also think companies, sadly, there's going to be some companies who choose to avoid it, choose to ignore it, and they're going to wake up one day and wonder why their business is smaller than it was before, and why they're not doing as well as they used to, and see that people are abandoning them to go to more, to use more sustainable products, to use more environmentally friendly, work with more environmentally friendly companies. They'll find that they're choosing to purchase from companies that are out there trying to make a difference. And so it's a little bit of like, at some point you got to run with the pack or get left behind. And I think that's true with social entrepreneurship as well.
Okay, so how does a startup raise funds? Like, say I had this great idea, and I don't know how to be an entrepreneur, right?
Yeah.
So here I
Yep.
am. I've got a great idea. I don't know what to do with it. I'm scared to tell anybody. But I know it's a great idea. And so what do I do? Do I just go out and start asking people for money to support me?
So no, first of all, Please don't do that. Please don't do that. Um, First of all, you need to do the most thorough assessment you possibly can to figure out how much it's actually going to cost you to get started, to get to a point where you're generating revenue. And if there's any way for you to do it without taking on other people's money, without spending other people's money, I encourage you to do that. It's called bootstrapping. It's what we did with Club Penguin. Ultimately, what it means is that if you are successful, you end up retaining more of the win because you took all of the risk. And if you're unsuccessful, you end up burning a lot less bridges, frankly, because it's your own money that got spent instead of other people's. Um, I but a lot of people assume that. Well, I need to go talk to all my friends and family and raise as much money as I can and give away a bunch of equity. The problem with that is that that's the most expensive money you can take on as an early company is money in exchange for equity. If you can do it through a loan, if you can do it through a grant, if you can do it by winning a pitch competition with your local accelerator, do that. Try to get as much money as you can before you have to start giving parts of your company away, because you can't get those parts back. And ultimately, that's a finite amount, that's a finite resource. And sadly, there are thousands and thousands of examples of great ideas, great entrepreneurs, great companies who loaded up their cap table, meaning their list of who owns the company, with so many names and so many people. They owe, have so much money that has been invested that even if they do have a win, even if they ultimately sell the company someday or they go public, the founder or the founding team end up making almost nothing from that. And there are countless stories of investors who walk away making a lot of money and founders who walk away making almost nothing after decades of hard work. And sadly, it could have been avoided. And it's one of the reasons why, for me in the den, it's a bit different, because I'm not just an investor. I started as a founder, so I can wear both hats. And there are times where I've encouraged entrepreneurs to not take a deal from a fellow dragon, because I say, listen, that's not a good deal for you. And as a fellow founder, please don't take that deal, because you're going to regret it, and it's not fair to you. And so, yeah, so obviously there's different phases. There's angel investors, kind of friends and families. Then once you've kind of proven yourself and you've got a company, now it's more than an idea, it's a company. Then you can go on and raise from institutional investors, VC, venture capitalists, others, and actually banks are doing a lot more these days too. I'm not sponsored or connected to them in any way, but RBC, for instance, has been doing a lot more than they were a few years ago in trying to help entrepreneurs, through loans and grants and things like that. BDC is another, obviously, Business Development Bank of Canada that's done great work. The other thing I will say, because you alluded to this too, kind of when you were running through the scenario, and that is secrecy. I've got this idea. I've got to keep it a secret. I'm not going to tell anyone. And how do I do that? And oftentimes that fear that leads to someone's going to steal my idea also leads them into a lawyer's office and overpaying for patents and overpaying for trademarks and and there's so much fear around that. And again, it's like, has it happened? Sure. Does it happen regularly? No. And in fact, most VCs and institutional investors, like myself, won't sign an NDA. If I literally signed an NDA every time I got pitched, I would be spending 3/4 of my day just signing NDAs, because it's just silly. And I tell people, I have no interest in stealing your idea. I don't want to go run your business for you. And again, I'm not in the business of ideas. I'm in the business of people who can execute on those ideas. So show me that you can execute on that idea, and I will invest in you all day long. Show me a brilliant, incredible, thoughtful idea that has zero execution attached to it. I'll encourage you, but I'm not going to invest in you, and we're so protective sometimes that we actually miss out on opportunities. We miss out on opportunities to test the idea with friends and family. We miss out on opportunities to test the idea with business professionals who could maybe give us some great advice on it, or maybe shy us away from it. To say, by the way, I've seen that 10 other times before. Here's 4 companies that have already done that better than what you're talking about. Maybe you should check them out before you go waste a bunch of money on patents and trademarks and everything else.
Is there an idea that you wish you had thought of?
Boy, yeah. I mean, of course, there's always great ideas.
Can you think of a business that you wish, oh man, I wish I thought of that one.
I wish I'd thought of. Yeah, you know what? I'll tell you. One of the reasons why I ended up at Disney and why we joined Disney with Club Penguin, was because, even though I'm Canadian by birth and I live here now, I've lived here for the last 17 years. I actually grew up in California. I grew up in Southern California, and my first job was at Disneyland. And I was a big fan of Walt and Walt's journey in creating Disneyland. I mean, he was a movie producer. He had kind of, Walt was a gambler. He bet it all on these short films. Then he bet it all on these on the talkies, on sound being integrated into films. Then he bet it all on a feature film, a 2-hour movie called Snow White, which is the first animated full feature film ever in history. Ended up winning the Academy Award. And then he took all that money and invested it into a new type of carnival, is really what people called it back then, called Disneyland. It was a themed park with carnival rides. And everyone thought he was crazy. And at every turn, people thought he was crazy. I got to say, though, working at Disney, spending time working at Disneyland, spending time there, it is a magical place. And anyone who's gone there has seen that. And the thing that I love about it at its core is its ability to bring out that childlike innocence in everyone. I don't care if you're 80 years old or 8 years old. You walk down that main street with those Mickey ears on and you don't care. You're not self-conscious. And there's something amazing about that. I wish I would have invented Disneyland.
Me too.
I wish I would have thought of that. But I look back now, I don't know if I would have had the guts to pull it off like Walt did. I mean, he took a huge risk. Yeah. Huge risk. And he bet the whole company.
I know. You make a very, and I guess that's what makes it also magical, right? Like it's truly a fascinating story. I love talking to you. I just think that,
I love talking to you too.
I really do. You always give us so much to think about and great advice. And I don't know, you're a good, positive conversation, Lane. And I really like it. And I can't wait for the next time. I really can't wait for the next time. So thank you so much for sharing all this information about, the importance of supporting startups. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me as always. And if there's ever anything I can do to help, please don't hesitate to call.
Well, I do have a couple of ideas. No, I'm just joking. But I just want to say that you can watch Lane in the upcoming season of Dragon's Den on CBC, and you can follow him on Twitter or Instagram at Lane, Lane, Merrifield, Merrifield. Thanks, Lane.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to another episode of TELUS Talks with Tamara Taggart. Be sure to subscribe so you can join us every Tuesday for another conversation. You can also check out our website, TELUS.com/podcast, and subscribe to our YouTube channel at TELUS Talks.